Bueno, kaixo, egunon, hasi egingo dugu.
Hi, good morning. We're going to commence the first press conference of the film Undercover. We have for this the actor Pansan Lindon and director Thierry Deperetti. So please raise your hands. I'm going to ask an initial question for the director of the film. The film is inspired on true fact. It's from a book. How did you decide to put it, to turn it into a film, and how did you start up with the entire process? Initially, I was proposed to adapt that film, the book, better said, but I wasn't so interested in that first-person story, but more of how the book was written, what was behind it. What was underneath, better said? How do you carry out the research, the undercover work, and how does journalist works with his informer, and how do you manufacture news like this? A character like this, or a scandal, for example, morally, how do we do that more than the adaptation of the book, which was also important. I'm not too sure it's quite clear. What I've said, explained is too clear. And then, of course, the characters, the main characters, that is, say, the real people to which all of this was about, that is, say, the journalist from Libération, the representative of the the Office of against drug trafficking, and the person in that central office, and the person in that central office was very important, and what interested me from a cinematographic standpoint. Hi, good morning. A question for Mr. Landon. I'd like to ask you the following. How do you see your character? Is he the bad guy? Is he truly the bad guy in the film? Or is it simply a guy that's doing his job and he's being accused, perhaps unjustly or unjustly? Well, would you like me to speak? But I'm...
Do it in English, then people can understand what I'm saying. Bon, en français, si vous voulez.
I'm not going to classify it in one category or another. I'm not too sure who's the good guy or the bad guy. There are good guys that are bad guys and bad guys that are good guys. It's much more complex than all of this. The truth be said, the problem in these press conferences is that quite often, and even in general, or generally speaking, it's more difficult for me to hold interviews, and new generation of journalists, for example, already give an answer to the question. They've understood the question so well that the truth is, I don't know how to answer your question. The truth is, it's a person who does his job very well. And when you feel a lot of passion and you do your work in depth with a lot of passion, it's as if we don't look to our sides, and we select very quickly, and we don't take a distance to see how far, for example, to what extent we're involved and stuck in the system. I think he's a great professional. He's a good professional. But I'm not going to enter into all of the minor details of drug trafficking, of judicial police, and what happens in the ministries. This is an issue which is an enormous issue, and the question is as follows, the way I see it. I have never considered this character, not even from the outset of reading the book, the script, and nor during, as something who was evil. No, if the question was, I didn't even think about it in those terms, that he was a bad guy. No, I can say no to that, but it's very difficult for me to talk about the character in 5 minutes. But to explain something in 5 minutes, something that's taken a lot of time to portray, several months in this case, because I participated from the outset. And my presence here, obviously, well, I wanted to be here with the director because that's the best way of showing that one is satisfied and happy with what we have made of this film, that is to say. I know that I'm not now answering your question now, but to be well known or recognized is not very important, but it's useful for this as well, thanks to your presence or saying yes to a script or to attend a press conference or another event. What we're doing is making a statement. So therefore, that's the interest that my presence here is, to help great directors, such as the case of Thierry de Peretti and those authors that make films that are different to the mainstream cinema. So it's very courageous, it's much more complicated, it's much more difficult, undoubtedly, to do so for the producer as well as for the editing. This is not going to attract a lot of audience, but we need, undoubtedly, a good script, undoubtedly, to be able to attract actors and actresses, because, of course, we're trying to assess what can be done with this, that, and the other. So therefore, I, above all, and I insist, and I'm talking economically, to the weakest, which are the strongest from the intellectual standpoint. That's what I like, so that's why I'm here. And then to talk about the character, well, the truth is, I don't like to talk about my characters. I'll never be able to answer accurately, that is to say. I didn't write the script, but if you ask this question, it's because it's all quite clear to you. So supposedly, he's a bad guy that does his job very well. Yes, that's right. Very good. No problem. You've got the answer. I'm very happy that you understood the question very well. It's much more important that I understood it very well. If I understand it well or not, that's... Sorry, he's not using a microphone now.
Perdón.
We can't hear him.
Non, je n'avais pas la réponse, mais je pensais que c'est un personnage très ambigu.
I didn't have the answer, but I was saying that he's a person who's very ambivalent, very ambiguous, especially in that scene in the court when he's defending himself. That impressed me quite a lot, and it changes the image that, for example, that I had before the investigation. Yes, perhaps Thierry could answer this, should explain that, because he wrote the scene. It's very interesting. Thierry, it is true, it is a scene in which we wanted to know whether he was good or bad. That's not the idea behind that. The idea is the reality that he's going to evoke and talk about is different or not. So, and that's also an issue of interpretation. And it's also the question of Vincent Landon. They say, we don't want to reduce him to being a good guy or a bad guy. He's got a point of view, and he makes himself heard, and he makes a statement. And that's what Vincent Landon does, like Jacques Villard. He's a person who comes to tell us something. He talks about a reality, and that of drug trafficking nowadays, what it means, how it is fought against, and whether we should consider it of being good guys and bad guys, those that abuse and those that are abused, or simply we have to talk about this reality and to address it as a whole and its complexity. We need complex characters who think and who are intelligent, and this provides, Vincent Landon makes us understand. And then we can talk about it and discuss this and say, well, okay, all well and good. Well, I believe it's the best person in where he has to be at that, the best possible person at that place in the struggle against that enormous force, which is drug trafficking. So therefore, I think he's a just person. I'm not too sure whether he's good or bad, but we should look at we only see him in public, but intimately we should see him. But he's a just person, and he's a person who's an erudite, that is to say, who knows and has studied this issue in depth. And that's what we perceive, at least that's what I hope, in the film. And that's what we see. trial in court. Hola, una pregunta.
First of all, congratulations for the film. I would not be too modest, Monsieur Landon. Maybe it's for a bigger audience. I have two questions. One is for the director. It is, if I understand it right, it is based on a true story and true events. So I would like to know, how did you shape this true event story? Where did you fictionalize it? And what was, maybe you have in the credits, you have thanks to Olivier Sayas. I was reminded to Assayas Cinema when I saw your film. So maybe you could point out a little bit the influence or why the thanks. And the question to Monsieur Landon, it's not about good guy, bad guy, but I'd like to know, how did you prepare your character? Did you do research maybe on real drug the drug investigators, or I don't know? How did you prepare it?
Vas-y. Alors, la question de...
It's all, everything that appears is true. All of the words pronounced in the film were pronounced in real life. Everything was said at a given moment. Everything that was said is true, whether that's true or not, but everything was said. That is, it's like when we read an article in the newspaper, it's true that it's been written, but if that tells the truth or not, that's another completely different issue. And that's the issue that the film addresses. The film was built, or constructed, better said, through interviews and sessions and meetings, and there's a mixture of all of this. It's all true, but in turn, everything is fiction. Yes, because we've got characters who go beyond reality, because of course we've had to stage all of this and put it on the screen, and it's not something that we've stolen. No, it's something that was manufactured, it's constructed, and in turn, it's true, but it's also false. I'm not too sure whether I've answered your question. And then, as regards to Sayas, my gratitude, acknowledgement to Sayas. When one makes a film, there are meetings, and we always need our films to be seen by many people. We need to talk about it with other people, and we have to talk about films. Olivier Sayas is one of our colleagues and a friend.
Say in English, then I can practice my English. It's very difficult for me to tell you how I prepare a character, because I don't know my secret. I don't know when I'm working and when I'm not working. If the question is, do you go in a police station during 3 months to be a policeman, my answer is no. I really don't care about psychology at the first beginning. I react as an animal, and how I'm dressed, what's my car, what's my name, and how I move, how I walk. And I think in French there is an expression which is called "l'habit ne fait pas le moine." I think exactly the contrary about cinema. L'habit fait le moine. There is once a journalist told me, "You look like the character," and I told him, "Yes, I know. It's my eyes, my nose, my mouth, my body, my voice, and my way of walking." Then there is left like 20% of the script to be someone else. So I worked all the time. Now maybe at that time I'm working. Maybe I will have to play somebody well-known on a conférence de presse, talking in English in 2 years, and I know how to say to somebody, he doesn't walk, open my bottle. But in fact, I met the real character in my own life before I knew that I will be in that movie, and before I knew and I met Thierry about 10 years ago. And I didn't know nothing about the story, really nothing. And I spent a lot of times with him in vacation, not in my house, not in his house, but in a friend's house. And it was so nice, so quick. And in the same time, I was a little bit afraid. I don't know why. Was eating with people, and sometimes he look at you, and you have 2 seconds, you want to disappear. And then the year after, we had lunch together, and when Thierry came with the script, and I read my part, it was really funny to imagine that guy, me, I'm going to be him. And the first thing I said to Thierry, before thinking about how he think, what it's in his mind, and I said to Thierry, I want to have a black shirt, because the real one has very often a black shirt, and it was the best way for me to be him, in the same time to be me in him. If it's after that's it. I always work like that. I start a long time ago. Very often I worked 6, 7 months before, but I don't know when. It's by small things like tick, 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 and I put it in my brain in a big box, and when I need something, I go and get it, and I put it in the movie. But I don't know how to work in another way. But my way is not, there is different way. Like you can play tennis behind the net or completely at the end of the court. The thing is you have to put the ball one more time than the other on the other side. So it's my way of working. So I can't give you more information. And I know policemen in my life. I've been at the commissariat several times, and a cop is a cop, a baker is a baker, an actor is an actor, an actress is an actress. They are different, but there is something like a tree. I don't know the name, le tronc. There is the body, which is quite the same, and then after, you decorate le tronc, but it's the same ADN. So, François Thierry, I know him. I know a lot of François Thierry. Jacques Billard. Voilà.
Juste pour rebondir, c'est pour rebondir sur votre...
Whether he's a good guy or a bad guy, I'd like to go back to that issue. I know it's difficult, but we did come to an agreement in saying that he's a dangerous guy. So, and we don't see him chasing bad guys with a gun. We only see him in public. That impression of risk and danger had to be there. It had to be perceptible, and that is also something upon which we came to an agreement. And there aren't many actors capable, the truth be said, of making us feel that feeling of risk, because one is afraid of him. You had to be afraid of him. I think you had to be quite afraid of him. Hi, I would like to ask the director, he said a moment ago that all of the words that are said in the film, you're not too sure whether they're true or not, but they were true, and they were written, and they were said. There's the Spanish actor, which surprised me when he says, when he's meeting with not with Vincent, yes, with Vincent, that's right. And there's a scene in which the Spanish policeman says, yes, the truth is Felipe González and the Spanish government financed GAL to fight against ETA how they could. And this is what ETA did, so it surprised me that you left that so clearly in a single phrase. Where did that information come from, and whether it was in the book? Thank you. No, it wasn't in the book. In the book, it tells the stories from the French customs. And we talk about how the book was brought together, and it was especially with the Spanish magistrate who was in charge of terrorism, but also in the fight against drug trafficking. And at a given moment, for example, the idea is to go back to the past, and it's not only the idea of talking about drug trafficking, but to go even further back to understand how things are. And at that time, he says that the Spanish state, at a given moment, was pressured due to the terrorism that was taking place in the country. And all of its power, all of its strategy, and all of its coercive strength at that time was focused upon finishing off and stopping terrorism, and to finish with all of those problems, and even resorting to people who belong to organized crime. That's nothing new. That's exactly what happened in France with SAC, for example. We know that European democratic states, on occasions, have appealed or have resorted to parallel police forces with mercenaries and other types of police officers. And this is more or less what the story tells us. When you ask for help to certain people to carry out certain operations, well, you will have to allow them to prosper, so to speak, allow them to prosper. And it establishes a parallelism with the GAL and the SAC, the services of civil action in France, with personalities who acted as links, which in turn they were here and there. They were in the GAL, and also in the SAC. And so therefore we're talking about a common French-Spanish story, and we're also talking about a story which is further back in time, but it continues to be alive. It's still a current issue. I'm not too sure that I'm revealing any secret. I don't think that judge or magistrate, it's not my point of view, it's the point of view of that judge or magistrate, and he's the person who is revealing that piece of news. Raise your hand, please. If not, allow me to ask Thierry that beyond it being a film about police corruption and drug trafficking, it's a film upon a journalistic investigation linked to many other films that we've seen as of late. What are the references from a cinematographic point of view that we can see in this film, Undercover?
Des références.
Well, cinema references, well, there are thousands of them, of course. There are many films in which I could think of, but it's quite clear we're talking about corruption, but also theater, for example, what discourse when we talk about drug trafficking, the discourse of the politicians, the police, of the people undercover, the discourse of the press and the media. So therefore, this is all theater. There's a theater which is fed by the entertainment society, whereas reality is perhaps is the first victim of that narrative. And that's where corruption emerges. But there isn't so much corruption. We may be against the methods of Inspector Jacques Villard, but in the film, at no time is it a film that talks about a corrupt policeman who economically takes benefit of what he does. So there are many films with these types of investigations, but it's halfway between one film, a drug film, or two subgenres, drugs on the one hand as a subgenre, and another film about an investigation. So to make a contemporary film with these two elements, with those two subgenres of films. So I've seen films like Men of the President. I, above all, wanted to see how they represented or how we saw the newspapers, or Zodiac, for example, another film is a reference. But the issue of the timeline of the film and the fluidity or how it flows, we were trying to tell a story through the words, where words are action. We're not going to see trucks nor people shooting at each other like any series that you see on the platforms, how to tell the story in another way. That's what interested me, and how to also make it exciting, albeit there aren't too many weapons where we don't see fireworks, but how to make the film to continue to be captivating and interesting. Well, thanks to how it flows, trying to tell everything progressively, just the same way as we showed the investigation of Andiré and Antoine, and I believe these were the references I had. Others that came from narrative of Chinese films more than of American films. That's where my references have come from. Well, more than Chinese, Taiwanese. One final question, please.
Bonjour, c'était pour savoir.
Good morning. You said the word back nov, for example. There are some things that coincide. I think that the film would have, because you have not showed us the consequences of the drugs in consumers. Well, I have not seen the film Back Nord, but I know how it's treated. But I didn't want to give a report of the investigation on drug trafficking. No, not at all. The idea was to talk about reality nowadays, how to manufacture a piece of news, a news article such as this, who pulls the strings of this type of drug trafficking, who designs the strategies, and so on. It wasn't. We didn't want to talk about consumption, drug consumption, nor to address the victims of them. But there is a scene that, at a given moment in Marseille, there's a shootout, and we see, just as later, we see how in a committee of the newspaper Libération, this issue is dealt with seriously, and they talk about that tragic event that takes place. So therefore, it's not only an idea of talking about figures and strategies and political communication, but more about those young people who die and who end up being killed. But I didn't want to make show of this. Quite often, if we show a shootout like this brings about a lot of moral issues to see what to show and what not to show. We couldn't deploy everything and analyze everything in the film. What we wanted to talk about, the background issue vis-a-vis drugs. We could have perhaps also deploy those issues, and also issues related to society, and to see what consequences that might arise. I would like to add something that has nothing to do with the film. I'd like to know who we've answered, because you never say who you are or what newspaper you're from. So I'd like to know who I've answered to. I'm sorry, microphone, please. Thank you very much. I don't say so because of this, because I'm just merely interested, that's all. I'm interested in knowing who I've answered the question to. And you, excuse me? What's your name? Okay, Beacon Review. Thank you. The person, I think that other person has left. He probably didn't like the answer and left. One final question, perhaps. No? No, we can't. Microphone, please. SAC, Services of Civil Action, SAC in French. You've got 2 days. Have you got a couple of days to listen to me? After the Second World War was finished or came to an end, there was an SDEC, which was General de Gaulle, who asked for it to be created so that they can listen to everyone and to get undercover and to see if anyone had an intention of doing a coup d'etat. But they were used right at the end of the Second World War, which was a counterpoint, really. And they were against the Gestapo. There were people who came from the world of crime, but in the SDG there were politicians, but it was quite varied. And the SDEC was dissolved, and there was a scandal, and that brought about the SAC, which was created by Charles de Pasqua. I'm incapable of saying when the SAC was created, but it did provide services, hidden services, and was also investigating in Corsica the secret services. They were accused of espionage and murder, and it was dissolved after the death of Oriol. I don't know whether you know about that event. Monsieur Deron, that assassination or that killing, there was a massacre, a family where they suspected that the family belonged to foreign services, and they were finally murdered. And this was designed by the state, by the SAC, the Services of Civil Action. They had to fight against the OAS in this period, in this convulsive period at the end of the war in Algeria. Thank you very much, Thierry Peretti, and also thank you very much to Vincent Lindon. That's the end of the press conference.